"13 weeks out from the Tampa Pro." Today, we talk about a new course that's going to come out on J3U, give you some inside scoop, also going to walk you through a leg day, and finally, we're going to talk about how estrogen is ruining preps across the world. So, update. Thank you everyone for tuning back in. Currently, trucking along excellently on prep. Reminder from last time, I had made some previous diet adjustments, pulled about 300 calories on average out, little bit of yohimbine in, and across those changes was a 1% decrease in body weight across the week. It was like 2.4 pounds. And so I left everything the same because that kind of aligned with exactly the rate that I was looking for and the visuals too. So after leaving everything the same, what happened this week? And currently I'm down to 232.2 as of this morning, and tomorrow will be my official check-in day, but right on track to be, again, another 1% drop in body weight. So I haven't done my caliper sites and taken my pics, but the visuals that you'll see here will show like just some gym footage that I am a lot leaner. I can see it all over, especially like side quarter turns. See it more in my front shots around the abs, just look harder. Even starting to get some more like faint kind of glute lines about to come in. They want to, so that they're close. I do have that look, not the look, but the feeling where you just feel so small. Even training, there is just not a lot of pump happening. Renee is right along the same lines of me. Like we train, we hit a muscle group and you get done, there's just like not really a pump that happens. You can't really tell if a muscle had tension in it or not. There's no mind muscle connection really there. You just have to do your best to align yourself in the machines and try to focus on contracting and really just focus on your numbers and making sure you're putting forth the effort to maintain those loads and reps the best that you can. Because otherwise on prep, if you're trying to chase this pump that should be there or this mind muscle connection, it'll lead you to doing the wrong thing on prep. You'll end up doing more reps or so light of loads and slowing down movements that it's going to be suboptimal to produce high amounts of tension in the muscle. So you can't let it guide you to that, and you just have to accept that this feeling of where you're at. So that's the feeling. It won't emotionally guide my decisions though, because the body fat rate is tracking well. Likely there won't be a lot of changes to occur on this next check-in day though. So over the past weekend, normally Saturday is Renee and I's like off day where we go do something fun, like go to CarMax and move furniture, which that was not an off day. Well, we had another day that wasn't quite an off day either. And that's the announcement, is that there's going to be a posing course coming out on J3U in the foreseeable future. Probably a couple months away. Just to cue everyone, it'll probably be bodybuilding and classic physique focused. Just like we always put out information, it'll be highly detailed, meticulous, and give some excellent cueing. Especially if you're a coach and you have clients and you're like, I don't know where to send them. This will be a great like baseline for a lot of people. And even for me, like with the person we have instructing, like picking up some good cues along the way. So with that being said, that was my off day, was being a model for this posing course, which when you pose for a few hours, that doesn't feel quite like rest. So it was a bit more of a taxing day. Nothing over the top though, but it did keep my body weight relatively maintained, which I'd spoke on earlier, is that normally on the Saturday off day, my weight ticks up and gets up higher, and it takes me a while to get back down. So it's good that I have some higher activity, and that's why I've kept coming down to these lows and getting tighter. So productive, but I will have to say, like, I am ready for this next off day coming up, and maybe I'll film it for y'all just to see something outside of bodybuilding. Some people were asking me to show some of that other side of my life. So maybe you'll see that. It is a prep off day, so it's not like I'm going out like rock climbing or something wild, but anyway, we might show that for you. Cardio for the week, still hitting the spin bike, and I had a question around the spin bike because I mentioned that the first initial about 5 to 8 minutes, I'll have my pace going and I'll do about a 30-second, maybe like an 80% effort sprint, and then go back to my baseline pedaling. And that I'll usually do like 3 of those across this 5 to 8 minute period. And that'll just get my heart rate up to the initial range that I'm trying to stay within, which is about 65% of my max, which is an effort level that isn't overly taxing to where I'm feeling a lot of fatigue from it. But it's still in a good range to have a high enough output that the time is worth it on cardio, and to see like good cardiovascular benefits too. So someone was asking like, isn't HIIT bad because you're taking your heart rate so high? It's going to be more like glycogen based and fatiguing. And so that's the thing I wanted to mention, is that it's not set up to be all out sprints. It's like 80% effort. And also my heart rate isn't going into that range where it would be indicative that the effort's really high and very fatiguing. And it's just a couple of these that are done. So just the initial push to get up higher. Says otherwise it might take you 15 minutes to get there. Then I only have 10 minutes left of cardio. So my average heart rate across the cardio session would be relatively low. So that's why I've been doing that. But the spin bike has been phenomenal this prep. Legs actually feel really fresh. They're not heavy walking around during the day, and it hasn't impacted my leg training, which we're gonna get into here shortly. On the topic of training, someone asked, John, lay out on the screen what your current split looks like on prep. So hopefully my videographer will lay this out as I show you. It hasn't changed since off season. So we'll start with a push day, which is more chest focused. I still always have that lateral first, but that's where I have my pec fly and a flat press. From there, we go down to a pull session, which is gonna have some lower back loading. That's where I have my bent over barbell row. Then an off day. Then I'll have 3 training days in a row, which the next one is a push day. Again, I call this my delt focus day, but all that really changes is that I start with still a lateral, but an incline press over my flat press work. From there is my next pull day, which that one's gonna be more chest brace for the rowing and also more vertical pulling. So I'm accounting for something not being as fatiguing that day, going into my last session, which is legs, which is what we're gonna see today, then my off day. And so I do have set off days. Let's see, Tuesdays and Saturdays are my set off days. I really like that from a workflow perspective, so I can really plan out my schedule for the week. I've done the rotating schedules and they can work well. It's tough when you need to be productive with work too. So that is the full training split for anyone that is interested. It is a little bit more biased towards definitely upper body. Steps still averaging around 10,400 across every day. As far as diet goes, nothing's changed there. Again, it's five meals across the day. I usually have 2 meals, then I train. My training day diet, 2,840 calories, 300 protein, 300 carbs, 50 fat. My non-training day, 2,440 calories, 280 protein, 190 grams of carbs, and 65 grams of fat. Nothing too exciting around there. I know I probably owe everyone a day in the eating just to kind of review what I've been currently doing and how I manage my starving hunger throughout the day. PED wise, nothing's changed for a few weeks now. So still around this 1,400 milligram total of anabolic load per week. 6 IUs of growth hormone, 40 micrograms of clen, and then 5 milligrams of yohimbine. That's the gist base around that. And again, performance has been pretty good and holding throughout the week. So it doesn't look like it's going to need to be changing. Leg day, let's jump into it, and then afterwards we'll answer why estrogen is ruining preps. So this session, I filmed this a while back, but again, it's gonna be the same session, so this has been consistent on prep. I still start with the lying ham curl. I like the prime machine. I do 3 sets here, and the rep range usually varies from like 10 to 15 reps. I just adjust the load as I go to try to stay within that rep range. I do like the prime machine and loading it with about 70% of the load at the very top peg. So it's heavy off the start, and then it lets up as you're getting close to the top, which is also when the hamstring reaches a point of active insufficiency. Basically, the muscle gets so short, you thought if you had a rubber band, you're putting this rubber band together, eventually the rubber band would kind of go loose and wouldn't be able to contract anymore. Same thing with your hamstring. It eventually gets so short that it can't contract sufficiently. So that's when you want the load to really drop off at the top. Prime machine is a great way to do that. From here, I go on to my leg extension, which this has been a prophylactic means to not get injured on prep. Normally I like starting with, those lengthened movements that load it heavy, like in the deep squat position, but I'm trying to be safe on prep. So still doing a single leg extension first, starting with this left leg, which has more of the discrepancies in it from previous injuries. The legs are very balanced strength-wise now, and also feeling better with posing and control with it. I think it has to do with some of the single leg training I've been doing, but I padded up with the new fit machine. So that's a EMS machine that's sending a signal to help with contracting the muscle. So I use a lot less load in turn, but also gives me really good activation of the muscle. On these, I'm staying pretty close to 15 reps across what's now 2 sets. So I have reduced one of the sets, mainly because my leg training, man, it's been progressing and moving up faster than even my push work. I decided to pull back volume just a little bit because my legs hold easy. So if I can manage fatigue on that leg day, I absolutely will do so. So just doing 2 sets, and then it can also keep my compound work at a higher output level as well. And what I have been doing across these sessions is slowly increasing how much voltage I give from the machine. I think I was starting around, I forget the units. It was like 45. Now I'm up to like 85, which it goes to 100. So that's been a progressive means that I've been using. From there, I go into some compound work, which I'm doing the Rogers hip press, which the way it falls, like you're kind of pushing down and away from you. So it does have a little bit of glute to it, but also a ton of quad because it gets also heavy as the muscle gets short. I love this thing. It's so much fun. It's been progressing great. And I do set my seat pretty far up. That way if you set it really far back, depending on your mechanics, that machine can start sweeping up and really load the lower back and pull the hips up. So that's why I try to position myself really far forward as I'm setting it. But here I'm just still doing 2 sets, staying within this 10 to 14 rep range on the Rogers. After the Rogers, I'll go back to a hamstring movement. So it gives my quads a bit of a break. I can get them a little bit fresher before I hit my hacks. I do a seated leg curl. So it's a brace pattern. Muscles, hamstrings are already warm. So now moving to like that lengthened position, just 2 sets on the seated leg curl. So that's it, just 5 sets for hams. Then I go on to my hack squat, which hack squat's only been 1 set, just one all out hard set. That's been progressing up really well too. And I've been able to add a little bit of load kind of across every session and still going down to this like dead stop. And the idea around the dead stop is to kind of soften that transition from eccentric to concentric to try not to cause so much tissue stress. And again, it's like an injury prophylactic thing for me. But again, with dead stops, you need to be able to control it down to those pegs, not just slam it down or try to bounce it off, because that's kind of defeating the purpose there. And that wraps up my leg session. So let's get into why estrogen is ruining preps. And I got this question from someone on the comments last time, and they were asking, where do you keep your estrogen on prep? Is it within some specific reference range? How are you adjusting that across the prep? With estrogen, it's really been demonized as it's the reason you're going to retain body fat and retain water on prep, and you want it as low as possible, which if you see a lot of protocols out there with PEDs, a lot of times already in place, someone's running testosterone high, but there's already, aromatase inhibitors or SERMs present, and potentially without looking at labs, you might have estrogen very, very low. And so is there a benefit to having estrogen very, very low? And I would say that there is more negatives to it. For one, there's a lot of health benefits to estrogen because we see people with high androgen levels and very low estrogen that they have increased cardiovascular issues. Lipid panels can be more altered around that. You usually see lower HDL and higher LDL. Also can be more renal toxic, definitely more neurotoxic. Estrogen's also protective for the skin, the bones. Also, penile tissue has a lot of benefits around that for elasticity of vessels and even libido. So there's a lot of health benefits around estrogen, but estrogen also aids in fat loss as well, because we do see as women approach menopause, estrogen levels gets really low. There is a bit of a shift of where body fat stores go to, and it ends up going a little bit more visceral. So high androgens increase visceral adipose tissue. Now, this really isn't much of the issue on prep as we're dieting, and a lot of these fat stores are decreasing anyway. But estrogen does not cause an issue with body fat stores, and it's really the ratios that matter. Because if you have a female that is very high in estrogen and also probably low testosterone, low progesterone, there can be this shift more to subcutaneous hip and thigh fat storage patterns, and that's more the problem when the ratios are off. Now for a male, when you have really high androgens, it's about the ratios. So we can have high amounts of estrogen as well. So I would say answer that question is that you don't need to stay within the reference range for estrogen for a male, especially when your androgens are sky high. So leverage the benefits of estrogen by keeping it higher as well. Now, what is too high? And we have to consider that when we're in prep, that we also want an accurate assessment of the physique and make sure it's not masked with water retention. Estrogen doesn't directly cause water retention, that's from aldosterone, but estrogen's an input on aldosterone. So are androgens like testosterone, nandrolone, and also so is growth hormone. So you have a lot of things that could skew your assessment of the look. So we might want to reduce one of those inputs. Some people bring up, hey, use like something like telmisartan and ARB to help with limiting some of the inputs and bringing down some of that angiotensin aldosterone levels. That only does so much though, because if you're running that many inputs, estrogen, testosterone, growth hormone, you're likely going to have potentially a little bit of water on you regardless. We could bring that down enough to where it's not skewing the look. And that comes down really from practice of what you're seeing in these individuals. So in general, you still can run testosterone as high as you're able to tolerate before you're running into these estrogen issues, for one with gyno or things like that, that maybe you've noticed in the off season, but then maybe just a little bit lower than that so it doesn't skew your visual assessment. I'll tell you now, for my prep, it's about 60% of what I run in the off season, just so it doesn't skew any of the visuals. Now, as I get closer to show, I'll have to assess of how hard do I look, and should I make that adjustment of lowering testosterone in place of some extra DHT? Is that going to bring back a harder look, or might make you lose fullness as well? Because estrogen does have a benefit for bringing that aspect around. Carbohydrate metabolism and GH to IGF-1 conversion, so it does have this benefit of keeping you full. So these are things to kind of look at and assess where you should put estrogen, not just where it should be in a range that's disregards how you actually visually look. So that's kind of my long-winded answer. I'm not really directly answering a question because there is so much to it. So if you want to dive in more of like, how should you really manage estrogen? What are the questions asked? How do you assess it? Check out J3U. That's why I have it made, so it can help you guide that coaching decision process. But anyway, thank you everyone for tuning in. Appreciate you, and we'll talk to you next time.